I finished A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, and instead of doing a review on the book, I decided to pull some comments from the internet. Some of these comments are the most dramatic, most funniest ones that I could find on the internet, and I have some thoughts. If you are unfamiliar with A Little Life, it follows four friends, four college friends in New York City: Jude, Willem, Malcolm, and JB. It follows them throughout their lives, maybe 4 or 5 decades, and it specifically focuses on Jude and how his childhood traumas shadow his every relationship, his every success throughout his life, and you see how his life unfolds. So the book has been out for about 10 years now. In October of 2025, it celebrated its 10-year anniversary. And actually, I got the special box edition of A Little Life. That's how much I love the book. If I didn't say that I love the book in this video, I'm saying it right now. I love the book. And you're going to probably tell that I love the book based on some of these thoughts that I have on these comments. Yeah, so the book has been out for 10 years. It already made its rounds throughout the book community. Like I said, I didn't want to pretend like I'm the first to review this book. And I didn't really want to do a review on this book because there's so many opinions about this book on the internet. So I thought it would be more interesting to review or pull some of those comments and review them. My eyes are going to be wandering the screen. Well, not the screen. My eyes are going to be wandering because my laptop is here and I'm going to be reading the comments as well as some notes that I took. So if you see my eyes not looking directly at the camera, that's what I'm doing. So let's get into it. The first comment is from Reddit, and this person said, I actually liked the writing style, but I hated Jude. I found him petulant and insufferable. He spent the whole book wondering why people liked him, and I spent the whole book wondering the same thing. Yikes. Yeesh. Um, when I first started reading A Little Life, I thought it was purple, like very flowery, overly descriptive. I was like, these sentences are really complex in the sense that it overused parentheses. Like the author was like pulling together different aspects of conversations and putting them together so you get like a full view or full idea of a conversation. And you just have to get used to her writing. Her writing is something that I just had to get used to. I at first didn't like her writing style. I was like, oh, this is too much over explaining, too much descriptives. I'm just like, this is too much. But I think it's needed because the book doesn't really have a plot. It follows the lives of these four characters, specifically Jude. So it doesn't really have a plot to move the story along. So to me, you needed like the over descriptions. You needed details that you probably thought that were unnecessary to kind of carry the story along. So let's address the comment about not liking Jude. I've seen a lot of people on the internet say they don't like Jude or didn't like Jude. And for me, I didn't like or dislike Jude. And I think me liking him or anyone liking him is irrelevant to the story because to me, the point of the story was for you to experience Jude's life and gain an understanding of him, his life, his trauma, the way he thinks. And I don't really think he's a character that you need to decide if you liked him or not to understand the trauma that he went through, to understand his mindset, his thinking, the choices that he made. So for me, liking Jude was irrelevant. Okay, so this comment is from YouTube and it says, I didn't have a problem with Jude as a character. I think there are people who go through severe amounts of trauma who do not respond to therapy very well. I have a problem with the other characters and how poorly they were written or how well they were written. JB, for instance, only to be thrown away in the second half. This book would have also benefited at the hands of an editor. So, a lot of discourse on the internet about the author's view on talk therapy and therapy as treatment. I'm not here to argue for or against therapy. I think talk therapy specifically is not universally accessible or accepted by a lot of people in a lot of communities. And I think that a lot of people have the right to choose if they want to participate in talk therapy, if they see value in talk therapy. I think a lot of people on the internet believe that talk therapy, if it worked for them or if they see value in talk therapy, that everyone else should see value in talk therapy. And I think specifically as it relates to Jude, he didn't see the value in talk therapy. And you could say that he was closed minded, he was not interested, he didn't give it a chance. And that might be true, but that's his right. He has the autonomy to not participate in talk therapy if he didn't want to. I think a lot of people like to force their beliefs, their thoughts on other people, and not in doing that, they don't realize that you're kind of taking away people's autonomy to choose. A lot of people don't believe in talk therapy, don't see its value. Um, and Drew was one of those people. He wasn't open to therapy, and I didn't really have any gripe about it. I think he didn't see how it was beneficial to him. Um, and he had that right. I think a lot of people disagree or would have probably disagreed with the choices that Jude made throughout this book. I disagree with some of his choices, but it's not to judge him for the choices that he made, but just try to understand. The other part of this comment about the other characters being poorly written, I think for me, anyways, I would have liked more of the other characters. The book is kind of sold as following the lives of all four characters: Willem, JB, Malcolm, and Jude, but it primarily focuses on Jude. And I do agree that I wish there was more insight into the other three characters specifically. Actually, all three of them. I think I wanted to know more about JB and how he overcame his addiction, his relationship with his family, especially because his father passed away. Wait, there's going to be a little spoiler. Oh, wait. If you have not read A Little Life and you want to read it, this video is going to contain spoilers. I'm sorry about that. So click off if you don't want any spoilers. If you don't care, continue. But yeah, I wanted to know more about JB's addiction. His father passed when he was young. I wanted to know more about how he navigated or how he was navigating life without his father, his relationship with his mother and aunt because he was raised by women. I want to know more about that. I wanted to know more about Malcolm and his struggles with his sexual and racial identity. Malcolm um, was biracial, black and white. I want to know more about his struggles with how he identified. I want to know more about how he struggled with his sexual identity. It was touched on, but it wasn't expounded on. And you just kind of went on this story and you found out that he got married and to a woman. And I was just like, well, damn, I wanted to know more about his struggles with his identity. Willem, I wanted to know more about Willem and um, his childhood. He didn't really grow up and have the best relationship with his parents. I wanted to know why. I wanted to know more about um, his experiences growing up with a brother that was disabled and how he continued to show up for him to the very end. There was so much more about the other three characters, Malcolm, Willem, and JB, that I wanted to know about, and it wasn't touched on. So I agree that the book was kind of sold as we're going to be following the lives of these four characters, and you got bits and pieces of the other three, but it really focuses on Jude. The next comment is from YouTube as well, and it says, Harold and Andy are so underrated. I love them both. They are the yin and the yang. Underrated how? Like, did you feel as though you needed more of their backstory? Did you need more insight into the lives of Harold and Andy? I didn't. I don't think it was necessary to move the story along. Um, I love them both. I think both of them played very pivotal roles in Drew's life. I think they were the closest Jude got to parents. Andy, oh, I loved Andy down. Andy was one of the few people that really, really, really held Jude accountable. And he was able to because of the capacity that he served in Jude's life, serving as a friend and also his doctor, providing him care. So he really was one of the only few people that got a really great insight onto Drew's childhood traumas and what he really been through, and he was able to hold Jude accountable in a way that other people in his life wasn't able to. Um, and I just loved Andy. I loved that Andy didn't pussyfoot around Jude. Like, he didn't treat him as breakable glass. Like, he was always honest, or as honest as he could be. You know, he really tried with Jude. Like, he really was there, even like in getting his other friends, Willem specifically, to like step up for Jude. And I just loved Andy. I really did. Andy was one of my favorite characters throughout the book. I loved Harold as well. I felt so much sympathy for Harold because he really, you could tell that he had the desire to be there for Jude, to really show up for Jude. And he just didn't know how to. And you could see throughout the book he struggled with like how to really show up for Jude. Granted, Jude did not make it easy. Um, but you could tell that Harold had a real desire to like show up for Jude, wanting to, pry a little bit and ask some questions about like his past, but not wanting to like anger him, but wanting to get to know more. And he just really struggled like to the very end. And I felt so bad for Harold at times. I was just like, damn, I see you trying. Jude is not making it easy, but I see you're trying. So yeah, I loved Harold and Andy as well. The next comment is from Instagram, and it says, I hate read the last 400 pages. I don't see why trauma porn is so attractive. Also, someone needs an editor. Too long, too many unnecessary characters, too much unrealistic trauma. I hated Willem and grew tired of Jude. I know I'm in a small minority. So I saw trauma porn as it relates to this book used a lot. So I had to Google trauma porn to make sure that I had the correct definition. And trauma porn is defined as any media that exploits an individual or group's suffering primarily for entertainment, profit, or to elicit a strong emotional response from the audience without regard for the victim. Based on that definition, I understand why people view A Little Life as trauma porn. There were definitely points in the book where I really wanted mercy for Jude. I was like, there's no way that someone is experiencing this much trauma. Like, there's just no way. This is just unrealistic. I was definitely one of those people where I was like, damn, Jude can't catch a break. Why is he going through all this? He went through so much in his childhood. He's going through so much in his adulthood. Like, why is he going through all of this? Then I had to take a step back. I think by the time that I finished the book, I came to the conclusion that just because this trauma or someone experiencing this amount of trauma is unfathomable to me doesn't mean that it does not exist, does not mean that people are not experiencing this amount of trauma, um, does not mean that it's not happening, just because my mind can't imagine it. And then I sat back and was like, damn, I'm kind of blessed that this amount of trauma is unfathomable to me. And I was just like, there's people experiencing this, and there's people that are experiencing so much trauma. They deal with so much every day throughout their life, and they don't get any reprieve. And just because I can't imagine it happening doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, doesn't mean that it's not realistic. So I had to kind of like check myself and be like, okay, this is not unrealistic. It's happening to people, and just because I can't imagine it doesn't mean that it's not happening. Um, yeah. So, like I said, I found myself at the end being blessed that I haven't experienced this type of relentless trauma, and I don't know people that have. Um, and it kind of also made me empathize and sympathize with people that do. Um, and yeah, and you don't know what you're going to experience throughout your life. You don't know how your life is going to end up. So you can't even say that you will never experience the type of trauma that you experienced. But as of right now in my life, I was grateful. I was like, damn, I can't really imagine this happening, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist and it can't happen and it won't happen. So yeah. Um, Another part of this comment was it was too long and too many characters. I agree that the book was too long. Um, I'm not gonna hold you. After the happy years, which is maybe the second to last section of the book, I was sigh-eyeing the book because it pissed me off. And if you read the book, you know why the happy years pissed me off, because it wasn't really happy years. Like, I was like, author, Hanya, girl, these are not happy years. So I was over the book after the happy years. The characters. There were a lot of characters that were introduced. And like I said earlier, there's not a plot in this book. It's really, really following the lives of these um, four characters, specifically Jude. So all the other characters that were introduced, I was able to compartmentalize and put them where they needed to be. So I didn't really hold too much weight to the other characters that were introduced. I think if it wasn't Jude, Willem, Malcolm, JB, Andy, Harold, Richard, Richard, I didn't really hold the other characters to too much. They didn't really hold too much weight. Okay, so the next comment comes from Facebook, and it says, so cringe. Only book I wish I could unread. Hated the relationship between Willem and Jude. Um, I did not hate Jude and Willem's relationship. I loved their friendship. I adored their friendship. However, comma, I didn't think that they needed to be in a romantic relationship. And I understood the purpose of it, um, primarily for Jude to maybe see that he can be in one, even if it may look different from the average romantic relationship. But I don't think they needed to be together. I think their friendship was so intimate already. I think the romantic relationship that they had, it wasn't needed to validate their friendship. I think that the things that turn intimate friendships to romantic relationships, Drew struggled with. he struggled with communication. He struggled with physical touch and intimacy and sex. Like he struggled with these things because of his traumatic experiences. And I understood all of that. And um, even though Willem was very understanding and very accommodating and very sympathetic to Jude, I think a lot of Willem's emotions and how he felt was overlooked because of his dedication to Jude. Willem was endlessly devoted to Jude, and it was hard for Jude to reciprocate that because of his past traumas and the things that he was going through. It was hard for Jude to show love in the way that Willem probably would have wanted, specifically intimacy. Jude struggled with intimacy, struggled with physical touch, and Willem loved that. Um, and obviously, that's a part of a romantic relationship, and it's not all. But Jude struggled with being honest. He struggled with being vulnerable. He struggled with communicating. He struggled with opening up to Willem. I just don't think they needed to be in a romantic relationship. So I struggled with it. I struggled reading about it. I struggled because for me, it was just like, well, damn, all this is being poured into Jude, and by right, he needs it. But who's loving on Willem? It was so hard because I was just like, damn, who is loving on Willem? Who is taking care of Willem? You kind of see Willem struggle on how to show up in the relationship. You see him struggle with his own feelings and if he could continue. And I was just like, well, damn, why y'all just couldn't stay friends? Y'all just could have stayed friends. And all this did not need to happen. Y'all could have stayed friends. Y'all could have kept that intimate relationship because everything that they were doing in their relationship could have just been a friendship. They didn't need to quote unquote be together for them to have the deep relationship that they had. Their friendship was enough in my eyes. I agree. For me, there was an imbalance in the romantic relationship, and um, it was hard for me to endure. I was just like, y'all could have just stayed friends. I really would have preferred if y'all just stayed friends because their friendship was so intimate. Um, and I loved it. And when they decided to get together, I was just like, kind of ruined it for me. But yeah, I agree. I don't know. I don't think I enjoyed them being together in the romantic sense. I think I enjoyed their friendship way more. So we have a comment from YouTube that says, "This is the only book that made me cry on public transport. It's strangely one of my favorite novels, but I'm not sure I'll read it again unless I'm in a very happy place." I cried 2 times while reading this. Um, like I said, this video is gonna have spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, please, cause I'm about to spoil something. My first time I cried was after Willem's death, and Jude started naming everything that he would not be able to do without him. Um, he started naming, like, he wouldn't wake up to Willem anymore. He started naming the things that, like, you could see really affected him, and I boo-hoo cried, because at that point you really see how much of an impact Willem made in Jude's life, and for it to get taken away from Jude so tragically, I boo-hooed. Like, I don't usually cry when I'm reading novels, but I cried. The second time I cried was when Jude went to go have dinner with Richard. After Willem's death, Richard kind of like forces him to come have dinner with him, and throughout, like, in the middle of the dinner, Um, Richard reminds Jude that it's his birthday, so Jude forgets his birthday. And when Jude is leaving after the dinner, Richard tells him, you know, Willem wouldn't want to see you like this. Willem wouldn't want you to be this sad. You know, Willem would want you to move on. And I cried because Willem really would have want Jude to move on, even though Jude was incapable of moving on. Um, and he really struggled with that. Willem would have want Jude to continue to live his life. And when Richard said that, I cried. Like, tears, naughty nose, like really, really, really cried my eyes out. And those were the only two times that I cried throughout the book. Also, the point about would I read A Little Life again? Because the commenter said that they would only read it again if they're in a happy place. I don't think I would read A Little Life um, anytime soon again. I'm not gonna say that I wouldn't read it again. I thought that I wouldn't read it again. I was like, oh, I'm never reading this again because the author pissed me off. Um, Hania pissed me off, child, because when she killed off Willem, I was like, there was no way. There was no way. You did not need to do this. Like, we were doing so well. You did not need to kill him off. Like, you could have picked a different struggle for Jude. And I didn't like that. It pissed me. You see, I keep repeating it because it pissed me off how he died. Um, he died in a car accident, drunk driver. And I, when I read that scene maybe 3 times. I think 3 times because I couldn't believe it. I was like, ain't no way Miss Arthur girl just killed off Willem. There's no way that happened. I was like, there's no way that we're going through this. And Jude, yeah. So I don't know if I will read it anytime soon because my heart just couldn't take it. Okay, so the next comment is from Reddit, and it says, "It's an absurd book. People do not go around adopting 30-year-olds because they like them. Jude had more concussions than I had hot dinners, and he was a top litigator in NYC and never made a mistake." Right. I mean, if you want 800 pages of torture, food, and apologies, have at it. It's fiction, people. Oh my God. Ugh. I think sometimes readers forget and expect every aspect of a fiction book to be realistic. It's fiction, it's not nonfiction. So sure, adopting a 30-year-old is unusual, but it's not impossible. It's not unfathomable. And I don't think Harold and Julia, Harold's wife, adopted Jude just because they liked him. I think they saw an opportunity to be parents, or to step into parenthood in a way that fit their current lifestyle. And they saw Jude as more than just Harold's law student. They saw a place for him in their family. They saw someone that they loved or could love and claim as family. So I don't think it was as simple as they just liked him and wanted to adopt him. So I don't agree with that. Another thing that I think that sometimes readers forget or don't take into consideration is that authors don't spell everything out. I think it's fair to infer that Jude wasn't flawless. He missed work. There's a lot of points in the book where he misses work, where he's out of work, where he doesn't show up for work for whatever reasons, whether it's his health reasons, for whatever reasons he doesn't. There's a many points in the book where he doesn't show up to work, and I think that you can assume that in those multiple absences that he maybe is not doing the best at his job, you know? I don't think it's realistic to assume that Jude was perfect as a lawyer or litigator. I think it's safe to say that he probably made some mistakes. Were they highlighted, or were did they need to be highlighted in the book? No, because you don't. The author is not going to spell every single thing out in a book. Um, we could come up with our own conclusions sometimes. Um, Another point in this comment that I saw in a lot of other comments was saying how unrealistic it was for all four of them, Jude, Willem, JB, and Malcolm, to be in the top of their field and rich by the time they were 30s, in their 30s. That's not true. Um, JB didn't become well off until later in his life in comparison to the other three. So I have to disagree with that point. And this is fiction, guys. Like, not everything is going to be realistic. It's not a nonfiction book. Another point that was a lot that I saw a lot of people make was everyone's rich and live in these expensive apartments or lofts and eating all these extravagant foods. You have to understand that writers construct circumstances um, to fit whatever narrative that they need. I think if Jude was struggling financially, then the story outlook would shift and you would kind of now focus on his struggles, like his physical and financial struggles, instead of focusing on his past struggles and his childhood trauma and how they are impacting his life. I think Jude needed to be well off. He needed to be financially stable so that the focus could be actually on his childhood traumas and how they are impacting his life and his adulthood, like how they're impacting his friendships, his relationships, his job, like how everything is impacting him. I think, like I said, if the focus was on his financial hardships or if he wasn't well off, then that's a different story. I think that's a different story. I really hope my last point that I made about the author constructing narratives or constructing circumstances that fit their narratives made sense. I think if, like I said, if Jude was struggling financially, the conversation shifts and we're no longer able to just primarily focus on how his past traumas have or are impacting him in his adulthood. This is another quote from Reddit, and it's two quotes actually that one person quoted something and another person responded to that quote, and I just decided to take both of them because they related to one another. So it says, I couldn't finish it. None of these enabling friends, including the doctor who would have lost his license to practice in real life, are real friends. They just made me angry. The response to that comment is, this is something that infuriated me about the book too. Part of being a friend is that you sometimes have to help your friends even when they don't want you to. Everyone in that book was a terrible friend to Jude. Okay, so at first I agreed. I'm not gonna lie, I agreed with this. I was becoming irritated in the beginning of the book with how everyone, specifically Willem and Harold, how they couldn't move past their own discomfort to help Jude. So like they didn't want to ruffle any feathers. They didn't want to ask particular questions because they didn't want to, like scare Jude off or make Jude become uncomfortable. So they didn't ask the uncomfortable questions. So in my head, I was like, well, how are these people friends? How are you guys friends if you can't ask each other, certain things, if you can't really get to know one another if you're not asking certain questions. So I was like, are these like how are they really friends? Um, but then I had to do a little bit of research. And I found that, and when I read this, I was like, okay, I get this. So I found that friendship dynamics often vary across gender. Male to male friendships often look very different from female to female friendships. Women's relationships are frequently defined by emotional openness, sharing sharing secrets, fears, and struggles as a way of building trust and intimacy. Men, on the other hand, don't always need that same level of emotional disclosure for their friendships to be valid or meaningful. Their bonds can be rooted in shared experiences, loyalty, humor, or simply spending time together. The absence of constant emotional exchange doesn't make those friendships any less real. It just reflects a different way of connecting. And that made me really understand the dynamic between the four friends even more. As a woman, women are really used to, talking, like we love to talk about our emotions, and we're very open in our typically we're very open in our friendships. And it's not safe to assume that men value the same things that women do in friendships. Um, And it really made me realize, well, yeah, they were friends. Just because it didn't look like how I'm used to seeing friendships look doesn't mean that they were not great friends to Jude. I think also Jude only really wanted to share surface level things with his friends. He didn't want to open up. He didn't really want them to get to know him on that level because he was scared. I think they were friends to Jude the best way that they knew how to be, and in the way that Jude allowed. Um, so the comment about you supposed to help your friends even if they don't want you to, that's hard. That's hard. It's hard to help people that don't want help. Okay, the second to last comment is from Instagram, and it says, I hate this book. I threw it on the wall after finishing. I don't want my kids to read this book. Too painful. Okay, girl, with the dramatics, like, not I hate this book. I don't really have too much on this comment. I don't think this book is meant for children, so maybe they shouldn't be reading it anyways. um, and if you can't read this book again, because you deem it too painful, then so be it. You have that right. You don't have to reread the book. I I'm contemplating if I'm going to ever reread the book. As much as I loved it. So if the book was too painful, too traumatic for you, don't reread it. It's okay. Tuck it away somewhere where you don't see it. Give it away. Donate it. Someone else might appreciate the book. You don't have to ever pick up A Little Life again. And that is completely your right to do so. But yeah, I don't have too much on that comment. So the last comment is from YouTube, and it's a comment under one of my favorite people on YouTube, Dylan Josephs. It's his video on A Little Life, and the title of that video is "You Read A Little Life Wrong, Sort of." So under the comment section of this video, I believe Dylan said this, and someone just recommented it under his video. It says, "This book isn't asking for your admiration; it's asking for your endurance." And I wanted to end this video on that quote because if you're interested in a little life, or if you read A Little Life, um, it definitely tests your endurance on how much you can take. I read the book, and while reading, there's so many times I contemplated, like, oh, I'm done. I can't continue with this book. It's too much. um, it's never ending trauma, it's never ending pain. Like, there's too much. But I think at the end of the book, you it gives you a different perspective. I think if you're used to books having a happy ever after, this is not the book for you. Or you may not like the book if you like happily ever afters. This book was raw in its telling. It was heartbreaking. It was hard to read, hard to get through at times. But at the end, I'm very happy that I did. I would recommend the book. There's definitely some trigger warnings, so check your trigger warnings before you read the book. But I would recommend the book, and I know that a lot of people on the internet that love the book said that they probably wouldn't recommend the book, but I would recommend the book. If you decide to read it or not, that's your prerogative. But I would recommend the book because I believe that it offers a different perspective than what we're typically used to. I think when it comes to books about trauma, we're used to characters getting happily ever afters because it makes us feel good. Like, it feels good that you see a character go through so much and at the end they get their happily ever after. But I'm really happy, or let me not say happy, I'm really glad that Hania offered a different perspective, offered a different ending that made you think. Because at the end of Little Life, I was like, hmm, would would I have wanted a different outcome for Jude? And if I did, what would that have been? Um, and I probably would have wanted a different outcome. I'm not gonna say that. I probably would have wanted a different outcome. I probably would have wanted Jude to have a happily ever after, but that's not realistic. Not everyone gets a happily ever after. Not everyone's story ends happy. So I'm okay and with how the book ended. And yeah, I think it ended how it was supposed to end. So that's it for today. um if you have any hot takes on A Little Life, please leave them in the comments, or just any takes period on A Little Life. It doesn't have to be hot or polarizing. um I want to know what you guys' opinions are on A Little Life, whether you hated it or loved it, liked it, disliked it. Let me know what your thoughts are. So, on the next episode, we are going to be talking about my reading goals and some lessons that I've learned in 2025 and what I'm doing differently in 2026 as it pertains to my reading goals. So, yeah, bye, guys.